In our ever-changing world, or ever-connected world, distinguishing between truth and falsehood has never been more challenging or critical. This evening, we're going to delve into the complexities of misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation, and explore their impact on communities. We're going to begin this seminar with a prayer by Brother Juan Curtis, and which will be followed by scripture from Sister Velmenia Stanley.
Thank you, Dr. Sewell. May everybody please bow their heads. Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to gather tonight. Bless the hearts of those that have gathered here and also the ones that were not able to make it. We ask that you bless the hearts and minds of the ones that have gathered here. May they receive the information with an open heart and a clear mind so that can be receptive and do your work. We ask that you bless the speaker of the hour. May you be a vessel, work through her so she can present her information in a clear fashion and that everyone can be receptive. These are us as we ask in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Good evening. I will be reading Proverbs 12, verses 19 to 21. That's Proverbs 12, 19 through 21. Truthful lips endures forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment. Deceit is in the hearts of those who plot evil, but those who promote peace have joy. No harm overtakes the righteous, but the wicked have their fill of trouble. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy. The prudent keep their knowledge to themselves, but a fool's heart bursts out folly. Amen.
Thank you for the scripture, and Sister Stanley and Brother Juan, thank you for the prayer. Now I'm going to turn the.
I'm just joined a Zoom seminar.
Now I'm going to turn the floor over to Sister Celeria Moore to introduce our presenter for this evening's seminar.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Jonelle Henry. She is a respected journalist and a leader in her field for over 20 years of media and communications experience. She is the CEO of Jonelle Henry Presents and teaches media and politics at the Washington Center. She's also taught at her alma mater. I think, is it Florida State? One of the
University
schools
of Florida.
Yeah, the University of Florida. And when they started talking about CRT and DeSantis, that course that she taught, it was virtual. She was not teaching it anymore. But anyway, let me move on. She is the CEO, I said, of Henry Presents. She previously served as a senior producer for C-SPAN, covering foreign policy, the White House, and Congress. She has a bachelor's degree in broadcasting, and right in front of me, from the University of Florida, and completed her master's degree at Johns Hopkins University in communications in 2012. And her focus was on intersection of race, media, and politics. She has also been a congressional fellow with the National Press Foundation, and she's a member of the Association of Black Journalists, and she's also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She is a dedicated leader in her community. She serves on numerous boards, including the Alliance for Women in Media as the DC chapter president, and currently sits on the board of the DC Black Film Festival. In 2011, Sister Jonelle launched her business, Districtly Speaking, a town hall series covering the most talked about social and political issues. She is also the owner of DS Traveler, a modern luxury travel company designed for the busy people who deserve a 5-star vacation. Without any further introduction, it is my delight to present to you Jonelle Henry.
Yay, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Sormore. I really appreciate the invitation. It's so great to be with you all this evening, and I hope tonight's conversation and presentation will be helpful to you. You'll take something away from it, and you'll be able to pass it on to everyone that you know, because it's definitely an important topic. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can follow along with me. And give me 1 second because I am not tech savvy, but let's see. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
This is her, and she's bringing up a screen.
Yes.
Okay, can you see it? Okay, perfect. Okay, so really excited to be part of this conversation. It's incredibly timely, just on the heels of the 2024 presidential election. Many of us are still trying to process that whole experience and unpack what that's going to mean. And during the election, we saw many examples of mis, mal, and disinformation. So tonight, I'm going to walk you through what those terms mean, what it's about, and how it impacted election results and the attitudes around the issues we care about. All right. So again, tonight will be, this is just a brief overview of what we're going to discuss. Introduction, we'll talk about the 2024 election, just to keep it timely and relevant. Understanding mis, mal, and disinformation. They're all three terms that kind of mean the same thing, but there's some distinctions that I want to make sure that you understand, and its impact on elections and attitudes. We'll end tonight's presentation with some final thoughts and takeaways. Any questions you may have, definitely encourage you to use the chat to drop in any comments you have throughout this presentation. And this presentation is designed just for educational purposes, and it aims to promote understanding of information manipulation while encouraging critical thinking and civic engagement. So that's my little disclaimer. All right, let's jump right in. Okay, so I wanted to start off tonight's presentation with this very telling quote by Darrell West, who's a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. And here's what he had to say coming out of the election 2024. Right now, many leading platforms are cesspools of rumors, false information, and outright lies. They are widely disseminated and seen by millions of people. If that continues, it will become increasingly difficult to discern fact from fiction, endangering our country's ability to address major problems. I thought that was a very telling quote and a perfect way to start off tonight's conversation, tonight's presentation about this particular topic. What we're really talking about is information integrity. And as you know, we live in an age where information travels at the speed of a click. We all have our phones probably right next door to us, where we can get information just like that. In this next hour that we're going to be here together tonight, I guarantee you there's going to be some alerts, some text messages, some phone calls that are going to come through your way. And so we know how quickly information can spread. The access to news and information in today's times, it's unprecedented. I remember a time when it was just the 6 o'clock news and the 11 o'clock news, and maybe there was something in the morning, in the daytime. But now we have a 24-hour news cycle where we can literally turn on the TV and news is breaking on the hour about information. So the challenges are definitely real. What is fact and what is fiction? Every day we have to decide, this is true, this doesn't seem true. And so we are encountering all of these pieces of information through our phones, through our computers, through television, radio, and all the other platforms that we use to get news and information. Some of this information, as we know, is accurate. Some of them is accidentally misleading, people sharing information and not knowing that it's not correct. And some of it is deliberately manipulative, where there are foreign actors, domestic actors that are trying to deceive and trying to cast doubt on the electorate. So very quickly, just as a way to kind of have some interaction, with you all in the chat right now. If you can drop in there, where do you get your news and information from? Tell me where you get your news and information from. Is it cable news channels? Is it newspaper? Is it podcasts? Is it from your next door neighbor? Is it the newspaper or magazines? Where do you get your information from? All right, let's see what you guys have to say. I see mainly TV, TV news, CNN. I see CNN and local news, Twitter, TV, cable news, some national news, BBC, cable news, newspaper, New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, Nation Magazine, TV, radio, cable news, local news, Washington Post, MSNBC. So there's a broad range of places where we get information from and trusted sources that we feel that we can trust to get the correct information from. And so that's key. So hold on to those platforms that you talked about and think about all of the ways that you get information so that you can make better decisions about who you're going to vote for. So we know that traditionally there's been critical issues that we've seen mal, and disinformation around. Some of them we're all very familiar with. This is nothing new under the sun, right? A lot of these issues are issues that we've seen manipulated and weaponized in order to influence the public. Public health is one of those major areas. Misleading claims about vaccine safety, treatment effectiveness, disease origin, all have built a doubt or mistrust in our public health officials in the medical expertise section. We saw this a lot during the COVID epidemic, the COVID pandemic, where there were misleading claims about taking the vaccine, and health professionals had to come out and kind of debunk some of these myths around that. That still happens to this day. Climate change, another area, another critical issue where you see coordinated efforts to really deny climate change, even though there's been scientific consensus about what is happening with with the global climate. We obviously see this in race relations, which many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with. We saw this during the campaign season, divisive narratives, false information that is used to weaponize and exacerbate social tensions that are happening in the country and undermine the progress that has been made. And finally, we see this during most often during election cycles, the election process being questioned. As we just saw in the recent elections, malicious actors have used a variety of tactics to spread misinformation, to sow doubt, and to disrupt the democratic process. So we know that these are just some of the critical issues that play out time and time again, where there's misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Now, let's talk about what each of those terms really mean. I see just when I watch the news, I see a lot of confusion and how they're used. They're not used correctly. And I like to think of them as, cousins, right? We're all related, but we still have individuality in the way we live. And so that is the same thing with these terms. So during the election, the 2024 election, we saw how mal, and disinformation really shaped public opinion and attitudes. Again, these were systematic, organized efforts that were there to shape public opinion and influence societal attitudes. And it happened across a wide range of critical issues. We just listed 4, but there were many more. And this is not really uncommon in a campaign environment. I mean, candidates are supposed to, influence you with their opinion, with their platform, and with their, the information that they want you to understand so that you can make an informed decision about who to vote for. The question is any of that information, or any of those surrogates, those ads, those speeches, is any of that rooted in mal, or disinformation? And that is what we are going to talk about today, is being able to identify what those things are and see how it played out during this election season. So first, let's talk about understanding mal, and disinformation, which is the heart of tonight's presentation. Misinformation, you've probably heard that term used, back and forth with disinformation, but they're actually very different. Misinformation is false information spread without intentional deception. In plain terms, You think it's true, but it's not. You're innocently sharing bad information. You're innocently sharing information, not trying to cause harm, but because you really think that it's true. Here are a few examples of what misinformation is. For example, it can be a concerned grandparent sharing a social media post claiming that a common cold remedy causes health problems, not realizing that the information that they're sharing is outdated or incorrect. It could also be another example, someone accidentally sharing the wrong election dates because they confuse local and national election schedules. So you could see this on social media, for example, someone sharing the date of the election, or you see something that's reposted and it's not correct. So someone could have accidentally shared that information. Another example is spreading a premature news update about a celebrity's death that turned out to be false without checking its accuracy first. And I actually see this a lot on social media. Someone has died, and then you look at the article and it's not correct, or it's the wrong source, or it's a rumor, or the families have to come out and say, no, this person did not die, they're alive and well. And all these retractions have to happen. So sometimes in sharing that, because things can be shared so quickly these days, we can prematurely send information out that's not accurate. So those are some examples of misinformation. Malinformation, that is genuine, truthful information that's shared with the intent to cause harm. So in other words, it is true, there's some facts behind it, but it's taken out of context, or perhaps it's shared, private information is shared that wasn't supposed to be shared, and it was used to cause harm. So some examples of that include, for example, leaking a politician's private emails at a strategic time to cause damage to their campaign, even though the emails are authentic. So maybe the emails were, the emails are true. It was written, that person did write that emails, but maybe it was classified. Maybe it wasn't something that was supposed to be released to the public. Sharing someone's real personal information online without consent to harass them. We've seen this in different ways, sharing someone's telephone number or someone's address out of spite, to cause harm, to threaten them in some ways. And so we've seen that happen in election cycles as well. And then another final example is using real but dated photographs from one event and presenting them as current to inflame tensions about an ongoing situation. We've seen how a picture that was taken 20 years ago but presented as something that happened yesterday, or perhaps kind of manipulated in a way to suggest that that person did something recently when this was something from the past. So not being clear about its intention, not being clear and giving context to what that real photograph is about, and instead creating a narrative that is harmful to the general public. And finally, disinformation. Again, you'll hear misinformation and disinformation used interchangeably. They're actually not the same thing. Disinformation is a deliberate attempt to create and spread with the intent to deceive. So it's not true. It's fake. It's false. But you're going to share it anyway to cause harm. You're going to share it anyway to deceive. You're going to share it anyway to cause confusion. And that is disinformation. So some examples of disinformation that we've seen played out in various ways is a coordinated campaign effort to create fake websites. These fake websites could mimic legitimate news sources. It can look like a news website, but its intent is to spread false stories about political candidates. Another example is deliberately editing videos that change the context or content of a politician's speech to make them appear to say something that they didn't. And so with editing, you can slice and dice in many different creative ways, and that finished product can be parts of that speech, but not in its entirety. One note about that, working at C-SPAN, if you follow C-SPAN, you know that we cover everything in its entirety. And so we don't splice and dice too much. We give you the full hour-long speech that the candidate made because we want you to be able to listen to everything in its entirety and be able to take that information so that you can make a good decision come election day. But we know that there is coordinated efforts to cause confusion, and you can splice and dice and edit something to say what you want it to say, and lead others to believe that's what was said. So that's another example of disinformation. And finally, creating and spreading fake scientific studies, claiming false health benefits or risks to influence public behavior. I mentioned earlier at the top of this presentation that public health is one of those critical issues, one of those spaces where so much disinformation is spread because it's claiming all of these false health benefits. It's saying that you're going to get better, you're going to get sick, or what have you. And people really care about their health. They really care about what they're taking and what they're putting in their bodies. And so if you can manipulate that and influence that in some way for your benefit, then you go ahead and do that and you create these kind of campaigns. So in short, misinformation is accidental sharing. It's false information, but there's no bad intent. You accidentally shared something that wasn't correct. Malinformation is weaponizing the truth. So there is some truth to what you're sharing, but you're doing it with bad intent. You're doing it without the person's permission. You're doing it in a way to cause harm. And disinformation is a deliberate deception. The information is incorrect, it's false, and you're sharing it with bad intent. So that's the difference between the key distinctions between those three terms. And you'll hear them said kind of interchangeably on the news, in different forums and different settings, but it's really important that you understand the difference so that you know you're able to critically examine and understand what is happening, what the issue is. All right, so here are some real life examples of mis, mal, and disinformation during the 2024 election. Many of you probably know a little bit about this or saw this on the news. The stories around Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs. Hurricane relief disaster funding going to undocumented immigrants. That was spreading around for some time. A video featuring a Haitian man who was not really Haitian, but was said to be Haitian, saying that he had just gotten to the US and had voted in 2 counties in Georgia, Gwinnett and Fulton, but it turned out to be a fake video made in Russia. In all of these examples, this was to create a coordinated effort to create fear around the other, fear around immigration, fear around a marginalized group of people, and just, going with that narrative. And so those are just some examples of some of the things you saw during 2024. So I want to highlight a few more examples that happened in real time and kind of walk you through how this, was used to deceive or confuse the general public. We saw this a lot on Twitter, which is now known as X, and Elon Musk. Elon Musk, of course, is the owner of Twitter, now X, what it's called X now, and has a lot of money, gazillionaire, and endorsed President Trump this summer and used his platform to share information that fell into disinformation, that fell into malinformation. So on a recent CNN interview talking about his tweets, Imran Ahmed, who is CEO for the Center for Countering Digital Hate, said this during that interview. He said that X has essentially become a perpetual disinformation machine. He, Elon Musk, is using the platform to persuade people that elections are rigged. It is such a tragic waste of a phenomenally powerful tool. That was his response. And his company, Center for Countering Digital Hate, literally tracks disinformation across several platforms and kind of exposes it. So here, let's take a look at what he was referring to. Here in the upper right-hand corner, you see Elon Musk at a Trump rally. And these were the tweets that he sent out for most of the summer, looks like the summer through the fall, all talking about the vast number of voters that are imported. In one tweet, hopefully you can see this, he says the Democratic Party's goal is to import voters. Another tweet, the Biden-Harris administration is importing vast number of voters. Another tweet on February 3rd, they are importing as many voters as possible before the elections. Another tweet on September 26th, they are importing voters. It is obvious. And it goes on and on and on and on. What's interesting about this rhetoric, of course, is his decision to use the same language. He's not changing anything up. He's not, reinventing the wheel. He is using the same rhetoric, the same language to reach the audience that he's trying to reach, using his own platform to do that. So there's some privilege and there's some influence there, right? I don't need to go anywhere else. I don't need to buy a $24 million ad. I can use my own platform and it can be sent out to millions. If you're familiar with X and the way it tells you some information about how many times people have seen each post, you can see right here at the bottom how many people shared it, how many people viewed it. And if you look at the amount of views that each of these tweets received, they're in the millions. 51 million here, 17 million here, 1.7 million here, 47 million in another tweet. That's just eyes on it. And then we'll talk about, the engagement, how many people liked it, how many people reposted it. So these are tweets, these are posts that went viral. And so you want to talk about influence, you want to talk about, impact and reach. This is how it was done to spread disinformation about a segment of the population. It is said, based on the Center for Countering Digital Hate research, that his social media platform generated more than 2 billion views just this year. 2 billion views just this year. So that's an example of how disinformation was used and how he used his platform to push out that information. So this was really dealing with the misleading claims about the immigrant community. Many of you, I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, heard about the misleading claims around Haitian Americans that lived in Springfield, Ohio. And on a CNN interview at the time, VP candidate Vance referenced those misleading claims by saying this: "The evidence is the firsthand account of my constituents who are telling me this happened. If I have to create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do." That's what he said about this particular issue. So what I want to do is walk you through how this started, tracking the claims of this particular group. So months before VP candidate Vance and months before former President Trump made these comments on the presidential debate, there were some online claims happening on far-right platforms about Haitians swarming the town and pets disappearing from this community. So that was happening online, on the web, on these far-right platforms that were created to generate this kind of disinformation. Activists later on made those same claims and had those same conversations at city meetings, at council meetings, and online, kind of amplifying this messaging about Haitians having these diseases and carrying out voodoo rites and eating ducks and being involved in gangs. So you see this narrative is kind of, increasing and accelerated online, and now it's reached a public space where these things are being said out loud. Obviously, what do you think happens in these cases? There's a section of the population that's angry, that's mad, and that's frustrated, and that's under attack. So these online threats and baseless claims were just circulating in this community. And finally, many individuals took to their Springfield city leaders and officials to do something about it. And so this is what's happening. It's not a major news story right now. It's just kind of happening in this small town, Springfield, Ohio. It's just happening in this community. But this is what's circulating. This is what's getting everyone under everyone's skin. This is what people are talking about. At this point, several months later, VP candidate Vance echoes these claims on X, uses the same platform, Elon Musk's platform, to echo these claims. And so this is where you see a significant figure echoing, repeating these claims that are unsubstantiated that no one has proven, that there's no record or any kind of information about that says any of this is true. But he uses a platform that can reach millions to, again, talk about immigration in this way, talk about what's happening in this community, and kind of encouraging people to follow this story. And then we all know what happens shortly after that, during the presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And he made these comments about this particular issue during this debate. And I want to go ahead and play that for you because it's so significant to what we're talking about tonight. And so I'm going to play that for you right now so that for those of you that didn't see it in real time, this will be the first time you're seeing it. And for those of you that saw it, a repeat and just looking at this again.
I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking
television
it from the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
I just saw something in the chat that said it wasn't playing. I don't know if I need to play it again, or did everyone hear it?
Yes,
I heard it.
Yes, we heard.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just want to make sure. Yeah, so you saw how it escalated. And what I wanted to do with this was the first time that I had heard about these rumblings. I had heard these claims. It was through this presidential debate. And of course, the good journalist that I am started researching it because I'm just like, that was wild. Like, where did that come from? And in researching it, realizing that this was percolating for several months. It was percolating for several months. But here is a platform, the presidential debate, the largest platform that you can imagine, where this information was shared. And through this information, of course, the story immediately following this election, immediately following this debate, carrying on into the next day, was they're eating the dogs. That's what was trending on X. That is what got millions and millions and millions of views. There were memes and videos and caricatures that were released regarding this. And the real impact of this was that there was a community that was now threatened, a community that felt attacked, a community that was misrepresented by a candidate running for office, now president. So this has so much impact and implications. And to see just, the thread of it starting with just some chatter online, making its way to city meetings, city council meetings, making its way to elected officials in that community. Can you talk about this? They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. I saw one the other day. Those were the kind of things that elected leaders were dealing with. The Springfield Police Force saying, we don't have any evidence of this, but the continuing conversation still going on. So the point where it reached X, and you have the vice presidential candidate at the time echoing these sentiments. And finally, you have the presidential candidate saying this on a national, international, if you think about it, because everyone's watching this, international platform, repeating these claims that, again, have not been proven. You saw in this clip that ABC News tried to say that we do not have proof of this. You know, there was some fact checking that was happening in real time, which I give them credit for because that's important. And this, you know, you want to go ahead and get that done quickly. And you see that there was an effort for that to happen, and you saw it play out. That is what should happen when you're talking about baseless claims and disinformation. However, it was just out. It was too much. It had gone viral before the debate was even over. So many people couldn't believe what was said. And so many people in that community also felt like finally someone's drawing attention to this. So the disinformation campaign spread like wildfire. And just to follow up with that, we see another entity, another official entity, kind of making light of these baseless claims. Here is a tweet that was sent out by the House Judiciary GOP. It has the fact check, or not fact check, but the check mark, which means that it's an official account. And you see here, it's tweeted out saying, protect our ducks and kittens in Ohio. Ducks were also part of the baseless claims about what the Haitian community, they were eating all the ducks. So that's the duck reference. This is an AI generated picture of then candidate Trump holding a very sweet, cute kitten and a duck. It's clear to me that it's AI. It's clear to me that this is a fake picture. But the decision for the House Judiciary GOP to share this, again, has implications. This is, you know, a source. This is information that's being shared. This is, as you can see at the bottom, 70.4 million views that saw this post. So this is what's happening during all of this. And so, of course, it went viral. Of course, it caused doubt. Of course, it caused confusion. And because of the way it was disseminated. Powerful, starting off with online and social media and entering into the media space. So this is just one prime example of how that all kind of went down. So the organization that I was, NewsGuard, is a nonprofit organization that literally tracks election misinformation, disinformation campaigns. And this is what their research identified. These numbers are startling. 963 websites were flagged for repeatedly publishing false or misleading claims about the elections. 793 social media accounts and video channels associated with publishers were flagged for repeatedly publishing false or misleading claims about the election. And over 1,200 partisan sites masqueraded themselves as politically neutral local news outlets. And many of these sites were secretly funded by political organizations, actors, without clear disclosure to readers. And so through these mechanisms, a lot of disinformation, misinformation, malinformation was disseminated during the course of the election season. So the reach, I mentioned this, and when I was talking about the examples, the reach is far reaching. It goes far. It's not just your neighborhood. It's not just your block. It is everywhere because everything can be shared and something can go viral within minutes. And so how is this reach kind of executed with all of these different elements? Disseminated through social media. We just saw how powerful that is. promoted through funny memes. Apologies, that's spelled incorrectly, but promoted through funny memes, people making light of very serious situations, publicized by mainstream media outlets. So even if this was false information, and even if you were calling out the actors involved, you still gave it some fire by actually putting it on your mainstream network where everyone could see. Some would argue that that's a necessary thing that needs to happen because you need to be informed about when these things are happening. Others might see that as a way for just giving more fuel to the fire on this particular issue. You saw this was circulated by influencers, people of great status. Influencers are, celebrities in their own right that the community trusts and believe and follows everything that they say. They can be celebrities, but they could also just be well-known people that provide information. And of course, we saw that many of these things were amplified by the actual candidates themselves that were out there promoting this kind of information. And we saw a little bit with technology and AI tools, editing devices and things like that to really kind of, again, spread this misinformation, disinformation, and create these campaigns around it. So this is not to be taken lightly. All of the platforms that you mentioned before could be the subject of or involved, or perhaps be have the kind of reach where some of these campaigns can come through, these misinformation, disinformation campaigns. So in a nutshell, what makes these campaigns particularly effective is really their ability to exploit basic human psychology. They use emotionally triggering content, they target specific identity groups, they rely on repetition across multiple sources to create this illusion of widespread consensus, widespread confusion. We saw that in the examples. We saw that in the Elon Musk tweets. We saw that in identifying Haitian immigrants as the target. We saw that in the repetition that in both examples that I shared, the repetition of some of this misinformation, disinformation. The strategic timing of the release of all of this content is really critical. It's during campaign season, during election season, where people are really paying attention to the information that's out there because they want to know who they should vote for. And so they want to know how the candidates, what they're saying, what they believe in, who they associate with, who they're fighting for. All of that is happening during this very critical time. So it's especially a good time for these kind of campaigns to take place, these kind of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation cycles to take place. It's prime time, maximizing this impact while minimizing the window for verification. No one has the time to check if this is correct. It just came on alert on your phone from a source that you trust. You don't have time to decide or figure out if this is true or not. The video looks real. The picture looks real. This quote sounds like something that person would say. It's just we haven't done the work to stop and pause and say, hey, is this actually true? This doesn't make sense. I need to do more research. And it's really no fault entirely of the public. We have to be more vigilant, but it was set up that way. It was set up that way so that you didn't have to think, but that we could use a platform that you trust to push out that information so that you don't have to question anything. Sophisticated targeting algorithms, all of that ensures that you can manipulate the content with the most receptive audience. All eyes are locked in on these platforms. All eyes are locked in on the nightly cable news channels to find out what's going on. We're locked into those roundtables of discussions around politics. We're locked into what our favorite influencer is tweeting or posting or video on TikTok or what have you. We're locked in during this time. Many of us are because we want to know, even if we're going to vote or not, we're still locked into the information that's coming out. So this is a receptive audience during a critical time, right? Election time. Bots, fake imagery, quirky editing, all of that is being used to amplify messages, to create false impressions of popularity and false impressions of truth. That's what's really happening here. False impressions of truth. This is not the truth in some way, shape, or form, and it's creating the impression that it is. So how do we combat mal, and disinformation? Well, first, we need to recognize what the tactics are. We need to know the game that's being played. We know that there's emotional manipulation out there. We know that fear and anger is used to really play on people's feelings. We know that the content that's being pushed out is out of context, and you're doing nothing to bring it into context. You're not doing that work because you want it to sound confusing. You don't want it to sound like there's any context to this. You want people to believe it the way it is, and that's it, and never question it. Deep fakes, altered media, with technology on the rise and AI on the rise, you can expect to see more of that in coming election cycles. Coordinated inauthentic behavior, creating behavior patterns around groups that you're trying to, continue to marginalize and oppress. And of course, these echo chambers and filter bubbles, these spaces where only these group of people are talking. They're not talking to anyone else. It's not a broad spectrum of diversity or anything in those conversations. You're watching that one network, listening to that one show, listening to that one reporter. And that's your funnel for information. And that can be very dangerous if that one echo chamber is all you have to get your information. Understanding the direct impacts on the public is key to dismantling all of this. So starting with the institution, we know that dismantling the institution is really what this is targeting to do. Voter suppression, those are some of the impacts of this false information. Confusion about the voting procedures. Many of us were galvanizing voters just election season, and confusion around the process, them feeling like it's really complicated and it's hard, and creating this fear or this kind of laziness about wanting to stay engaged. Nobody wanted to stay engaged because it's just too hard. It's too much work. I don't want to do it. Delegitimizing the electoral process, the process that's been in place, that's been voted on, that has worked for years and years and years, all of a sudden is in question this year, this election cycle. Why is that? Polarization of the electorate, us versus them, she versus he, this group versus that group, creating these polarizing characters so that you either love them or hate them. There's no middle ground. And then, of course, an overall erosion of trust in the institution. This is what's happening when these kind of campaigns are sent out to the public. This is how the public is receiving it, and this is what's happening, and it's destroying our democracy. So what are some of the social effects that we need to be aware of as we're thinking of how to dismantle this? Well, of course, I mentioned the increased polarization, a decreased trust in expertise, experts doing what they do, scientists, researchers, doctors. These are experts in their field, specialists, giving you the truth and you not believing them. Why? How come? Community division. We've seen that in so many different ways. The community is divided. That happened in Springfield, right? Like putting neighbor against neighbor and casting doubt about your neighbor, about your community. Weakened social cohesion. We don't know how to talk. We don't know how to disagree. We don't know how to have civic engagement on any elevated level at all. We've lost sight of that because we argue through the power of a pen or the power of a keyboard. And so we don't even know how to get together and have dialogue and have conversation about the issues that matter to us, or even seek some kind of compromise or seek some kind of collaboration. That's just not happening. It's just dividing the nation, and it's us versus them. And then, of course, I'm sure many of us can speak to the rise in conspiracy thinking. We see it play. I've seen so many conspiracy theories on social media, on Facebook in particular, where it's just like, what if this is the real reason that this is happening? Well, all that's coming from these campaigns that are causing us to doubt and question the system at play. And so, and I'm not trying to say that it isn't, I think there are times when we do need to question the institution and question the system. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about it being fueled by the campaigns of disinformation. And that's really what I'm focusing on here. And then we'll also notice the direct impact it has on the public through media consumption changes. People get tired, the news fatigue. I'm done. I'm not going to listen to informed opinions anymore. I'm not going to listen to expertise that are on the news. I'm not going to listen to any of that anymore because I'm just exhausted. And I heard from so many people in my community about the exhaustion of trying to keep up with this, right? So these campaigns make it so that it can feel tiring. It could feel like all is lost. Don't worry about it. Just stop watching this news channel, that news channel, what have you. And a decreased ability to verify information. Information is coming so fast that by the time you think like if that's true or not, something else has come out and you just kind of feel like overwhelmed by all of the information you have to fact check. You're relying on your media, which is traditionally known as the fourth estate, relying on your media to fact check it. You're relying on these sources, these institutions, these entities to do all of that work. But when it's just left up to you, it can feel overwhelming. So understanding how mis, mal, and disinformation impacts the society, impacts your communities, that's the first start in understanding what to do to kind of, you know, just disable all of this. So the next thing I just wanted to talk about was how do we combat this? I know that's on the minds and hearts of many of you on the call right now. Detect and defend. That's what we need to be thinking about on an individual level as well as the institutional level. On the individual level, here are some things that we need to do. Increase our critical thinking skills. You know, we can't just blindly watch things and just accept it for what it is. I'm not saying be a critic, but definitely be a shark. Look at information, and if something doesn't feel right about it, if something feels off about it, then you know that it's an effort to cause confusion, and it's up to you to do the work to really examine what that's about. Source verification. This is really huge, and I want us to get better at this, being able to identify the source. Who is the source of that information? You have a name? Do you have an organization? Do you have a company? Look them up. What do they believe in? What does their About Us section say? Who are they? Are they being funded by actors that don't care about you, don't care about your the things that you care about? Emotional awareness. Coming into an election season, going in, thinking like this is an emotionally charged season of the American political process. I should go in expecting that there's going to be charged opinions. People are going to be angry and mad and sad and happy. There's an awareness that you have about what is at stake and what is happening. So you want to just kind of understand that and know that that's part of the process. Cross-referencing information goes back to source verification, making sure that your information is coming from a reputable source. And if you're only hearing it from one source, that should raise your eyebrow. Multiple sources should be confirming something that's true. And so go ahead and do that work and make sure that it's actually correct information. And this one is hard because I've seen it happen so many times. I've seen members of the media do this. And in our effort to want to be the first to get everything out, we share information that's possibly harmful or not true. So delay sharing until verification. Before you post that article about that celebrity that died, check the article source. Who is it coming from? Has any other major news source confirmed that that person has died? Or is it just this one blogger that you follow? Has any other sources confirmed this? That's going back to the cross-referencing. What is the date of the article that this person supposedly died? You know, checking the dates. That's really, really key, because sometimes that's a dead giveaway, no pun intended, of what this is about. On the institutional level, what can our organizations, our agencies, our companies, what can they do to detect and defend mis, mal, and disinformation? Creating a fact-checking infrastructure, whether that's an organization, whether that's a company. Many media companies have a fact-checking department. Social media companies have been asked by Congress to create fact-checking and monitoring departments so that they can actually look at the content that's on their specific platforms, respective platforms. Also, media literacy education. This is something that I'm personally passionate about. Helping our young people understand how to consume information, when, what they should be looking for, when things don't sound right, what they should be doing, what does it look like, giving them examples. And so that should be part of not just, I learned about media literacy in journalism classes, but that should be part of a general education curriculum, because it's an important part of how everyone consumes information. You are going to be on these platforms. You should have an awareness of how to critically examine the information that's coming across your way. Content moderation, obviously, I talked a little bit about that, creating those infrastructures, those departments at all the agencies, at all the organizations, to make sure that there is a way to monitor what's coming and what's being posted on their platforms. Like social media companies really being forced to take ownership and take responsibility for some of the disinformation that's coming across their platforms. Transparent reporting practices, making sure that the information that you get, it's transparent. You know who the source is. If someone's quoting someone, they're attributing it to someone. They're attributing it to an organization. If you notice throughout this presentation, I had sources lined up because I wanted you to know where I got my information from, so that you're not led to believe that I created it. It came from someone else, and I'm using it to help build my case in this presentation. But that's really important. So making sure that it's transparent, making sure that when there are errors that are made, that there's a retraction and you just own up to the fact that something wasn't correct or wasn't true. And then, of course, coalition building, and that can take on many different, that can be taken on in many different ways. But in your organizations, like the one that you're in right now, where you're collaborating and connecting and trying to build a coalition around this information, that's always a really healthy start. And as a side note, I think it's really important that your group in particular wanted to have this conversation. There is this idea that separation of church and state means that we don't talk about issues like this, and we don't talk about politics in faith spaces, and that is absolutely not true. We know historically that this is where this information was shared. Oftentimes this is about advocacy, this is about understanding the issues. This is not necessarily about telling you who to vote for, but it's about understanding the policies and the issues that can either bring harm to your lives or can threaten your way of living, your existence while you're here. And so we know during the civil rights movement, this is absolutely what was being done to equip and mobilize individuals. So I just wanted to mention that, and thought this was great that you all wanted to meet and have this dynamic conversation. So just to conclude, just some tips and best practices. We're constantly figuring out what's truth versus fiction, how to tell the difference. I've already mentioned some of these, so I'm just going to run through them very quickly, but checking the quotes, making sure it's attributed to someone, reviewing the dates of the publication or the date when it aired, carefully examining photos and videos. If something seems off to you, it probably is. If there's no credit, someone had to have taken that picture. It should be credited. If it's not, then where is it coming from? Research the source. So yes, you found out who the person was that said this quote. Do you agree or disagree with what they had to say? Find out who they are, and so that's what a lot of people did with Elon Musk. They researched him, they tried to figure out who he was, what he believed in, and that opened up a whole information about who he was. Follow the money. There's so much money to be made in these disinformation campaigns. There's so many actors that are doing this to build and to make money, because they know at the end of it, it's going to cause all this confusion, all this information, all these campaigns, and they're going to get paid handsomely for doing that. So follow the money, see where the money is being spent. What are they using that money towards? Is it to spread disinformation? Is it to spread malinformation? Follow reputable news agencies and publications. And this one's tough because I know there's a lot of dialogue around whether our mainstream media is still the reputable news agencies of the day. But follow the ones that that have great reputations, that fact check on all the time, that if they announce something, if something is breaking, that it's going through a whole process, and it's not just the first, it's not just about being the first, it's about being correct, being right. Diversify your consumption. If you follow traditionally, conservative or traditionally liberal, entities, you may want to mix that up a little bit. Maybe do some foreign perspectives, some BBCs, some NPR. Maybe there's radio. Try to build a diversified, way to consume information, because the story is told in different ways using these different platforms, and it only kind of elevates the way you consume news and the way you understand the stories. Ask an expert. A running joke is that my friends will come to me and they're like, Janelle, is this true? Like they'll literally come to me because they know that I have a journalism background and they know that I fact checked it before I even, posted it. And so, but check with the people, the doctors in your life, the lawyers in your life, the teachers in your life, and ask them if something like this even sounds true. And that's a great way to have a spirited conversation, but to also go to someone that you trust that's right in your neighborhood. This one I'm really passionate about, teach civics. There is a decline in what our young people know about civics engagement and education. Coming to the table ready to argue, ready to debate, but not even understanding how the process works. Now, I know that there has been concerted efforts to get civics back into middle and high school, and I would encourage us to continue to do that work. It's so important to elevate the dialogue, but to help our young people know exactly what rights they have and how they can use their voice. And I think it's helpful for us too to get a reminder as well. I had civics when I was in school, but it went away, and now there's an effort to bring it back. And so if there's adult physics class that we can talk about, we can teach, I think our library systems are a great nonpartisan way for us to be able to learn that information. And then finally, support nonprofits and fact-checking organizations who monitor misinformation and disinformation. And I'm going to share a few of them with us as well today. So here are just some resources I mentioned NewsGuard at the top, but I will definitely send this out in a PDF form that you all can have. But these are great organizations, great entities that do this for a living, not just during election time, but all year round. And so these are great resources, factcheck.org, PolitiFact, Washington Post Fact Checker has been around for some time. And even this new one, logically.ai, which is now tracking artificial intelligence, because that's the new thing of the day. Also, I mentioned NewsGuard before and Brookings, all of these think tanks that are based here in DC, they do excellent work in this space. They have whole departments and senior fellows that are using this information to really educate the public. So these are great starting places for you to follow some of the organizations and some of the media companies that are already doing this work. So I will definitely make sure that this is available to you in a PDF form so that you can use it and share it with your community. And then just some final thoughts as we conclude tonight on this presentation. Think about all of the different ways that you consume information these days. At the beginning of this presentation, I asked you what were the sources that you use. Think about how you consume information and how information is coming to you in a daily fashion. They're not just trying to convince you of something, these actors, for example, they're often aiming to make you doubt everything. So think about, what are you doubting? What are you questioning? What's happening? They play on our basic human instincts, fear, anger, doubt. That's really what's at the heart of a lot of these campaigns and what they're trying to do to the population. But don't get discouraged. Understanding how these tactics work is the first step in not falling for them. So hopefully this presentation helped you to identify what they look like, and so that you can go and do your own kind of fact-checking work and your own, misinformation, disinformation takedown. You can do all of that on your own and know when something is not right. And you can do the work in making sure that the community around you doesn't believe the hype. So some questions for consideration that I encourage you to talk about offline or in your community groups is, what are some practical ways to spot these kind of campaigns when they pop up in your daily life? What strikes you as most concerning about these manipulation tactics? What about it really gets under your skin? What don't you like about it? And what aspects of tonight's presentation have you noticed in your own media conceptions? Were some of the examples that I shared, were those new things to you, or were you following that story along? There's so many more instances during the campaign of misinformation and disinformation and malinformation. I could be on this presentation for hours listing them. But the key is to really be informed, to stay informed, to never give up on being informed, and to always try to elevate the conversation and elevate our media literacy around this particular issue. So that is really all I have to present this evening. I would love to stay in touch with everyone. You can reach me at districtlyspeaking.com. I do this for a living where I host discussions like this, panel discussions. I help you put together discussions like this as well. So I'm excited to see what comes out of this, but I thank you for inviting me on this very timely conversation. Appreciate you, Soror Moore, for the invitation. And again, the opportunity to share something that I'm deeply passionate about and something that I think is really important, whether there's an election or not. So I will conclude there, but I'd love to hear any final thoughts, any takeaways. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Right, thank you. Are there any questions? I think I saw one come up in the chat. I can't.
Yes, I did. Do you think that the Washington Post fact checker will be impacted by Bezos' ownership and the departure of so many well-known? You know, that's a really excellent point. There's a lot of things that are happening right now at the Washington Post behind the scenes. I do think it may have some impact. There's a lot of questions that are being asked right now. And I think with the departure of so many influential and well-known columnists, I am curious to see what's next. I think that department is still in existence, and I think it's still doing its important work. But that is definitely something to continue to track. I think even with, I see many are now boycotting Amazon. You know, I'm curious to see where this is going to go, especially as President Trump takes office and begins his new administration in the new year. So I do think there'll be some impact, some fallout from this. I'm not sure how it's going to, but I will definitely be paying attention.
All right, are there any other questions? If so, let's put them in the chat. I can't see the chat.
I see it. I don't see anyone else.
Okay.
I don't see any other questions, but again, thank you all for having me. There's someone, I think.
Yes. Hi. Yes. Thank you so much. The presentation was very informative. But similar to the Washington Post, the concern about the written media, such as the New York Times and other places where these billionaires are starting to own these papers. How do you, what would be the method of discerning if they're being truthful based on who's owning them now? You know, if those newspapers aren't being used to weaponize the Trump administration.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. We're definitely in interesting times. I have faith and I hope that these institutions that were supposed to be created without any kind of partisan bias continues. This is, you know, as a journalist, this is the core of who we are, regardless of ownership. And I just really hope this is not the trend that we're seeing and all of our entities are going to fall. I think as an individual, though, you are well within your right to research who is the owner of these entities, of these media companies, and make a decision for yourself if you want to be aligned with that particular outlet. I am hoping that it doesn't change the core of what journalistic integrity is supposed to be. I'm hoping and I'm hopeful that it doesn't change the opinion and editorial aspect of these newspaper companies. And I really hope we're not witnessing a deterioration of that and within the monopoly landscape. It's unfortunate that this is where we are right now. We need these institutions to stay above the fold. We need them because how else are we going to consume information? It's going to turn into like what, anarchy or dictatorship. And we don't want to see that. There's plenty of other countries that are doing that right now. And America is not one of those that has ever believed in any of that. So I'm choosing to stay hopeful. I'm choosing to stay hopeful. Newspapers, media companies have gone through it over the last 25, 30 years. And I just really hope this is a time that's really needed for this kind of unbiased, truthful, integrity filled entity, filled platforms. We need more of that. So I really hope it doesn't impact that, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. And I hope that if I come and talk to you all again, I'm not reporting that out.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. That's a great question.
Anyone else?
Can I pose a question? I don't know
Yes.
if I have to be here. My name is James Sykes. I joined the call a little late, but thank you so much for the information. My question deals with, we've got so many media companies. There are only a few media companies, and they're owned by a select few people. We've had a media company that really biased this whole election. You have Fox News, who slanted information out there so much that the people who only gather their news from Fox got a completely different impression and understanding of what is happening here. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, how do we, I think it's too late to get the money out of the media. We've allowed all of that to consolidate too much. I think it's on each and every one of us individually and collectively to try word of mouth. You said teach civics. People need to talk about this. I mean, these are the conversations we need to be having with each other, one-on-one as well as collectively in a much larger setting, in my opinion. But even though Fox was I'm sorry, my question is, even though Fox was sued for nearly $1 billion, you see what they continue to do. Tucker Carlson left and all those people left, but the organization continued to do the same thing they were doing before. So, I mean, so
Yeah.
what's the redress there?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, and the effort in you becoming more media literate and media savvy, that is going to play into this. I think what's driving those dollars is also viewership. And so if you stop viewing and take a whole bunch of people with you, that is going to impact their bottom line, and they're going to see that effort as well. I also think we're living in a time right now where even if you leave a major network, like you mentioned Tucker Carlson, there's so many other avenues for him to still get his message out. There's so many platforms that he can start on his own. He doesn't need $1 million to start a podcast or to start his own company or to start a YouTube channel. So that's what's really changed about what's happening now, is that even when someone leaves, or even when a network is receiving all of this attention for, bad things, there's still other ways to get their information out there. There's still other ways for the members of their company to have influence in other ways. And so I think that's really what's really hard to reconcile with at this point, because there's just so many, again, when I mentioned at the top that there's so many ways to get information, there's so many ways to get information. Nothing, it's like this attitude of nothing is going to stop me from this information getting out, even if I know that it's rooted in efforts to harm or deceive or make the public doubt about the process. So I mean, a lot is changing in the landscape. A lot of different things are coming under fire right now, and I think it's really going to take the community to push back and say, hey, I'm not going to either watch you anymore, I'm not going to support you anymore until these things are changed. And it has to be done en masse. It has to be done in large numbers for it to really have that kind of impact. But to your point, I think more of these conversations need to happen. Even as a journalist, I kind of think we need some time where we get offline, get off TV, get off the internet, and literally sit and have a conversation about civics, about learning from each other, about the process. How was your voting experience? What do you think needed to change? And being able to bringing that into the dinner table, bringing that into the bar, bringing that into different spaces so that we can have these informed conversations. And, I envision us having those kind of dialogues and having it from, talking to our kids all the way up through the generation to make sure that the system that so many died and fought for is actually doing what it's supposed to do. So I definitely agree with you that we need to be having these conversations. I think we need to also disrupt spaces that these conversations are not happening in. So in the faith-based community, for example, this kind of restorative justice and conversations around the process and civics have often been shied away from in the faith-based community, but not anymore. We saw so many this election season use that platform, because remember, the faith-based community is a trusted source. It's just as trusted as any of the news agencies that you're watching. This is a trusted source. There are hundreds of churches where there's tens of thousands of people that are attending every Sunday, every week, every Saturday, what have you. And so there's so much influence that the faith-based community can be doing to making sure that their community members know the information that they need to know and feel empowered and equipped. And so I just encourage organizations and community groups like this one to continue these dialogues and to continue this work, because it's so important, and you might not get it from, your late night news, what have you. And so I think these conversations are really important. And I know I'm in my company, Districtly Speaking, are definitely doing the work to kind of figure out what needs to happen in civics, how everyone I know can learn about it, so that the next election, which by the way is in 2 years, if we're talking midterms, the next election season, we're not still at the place where we're just like, well, how do I vote? Why does my vote count? What should I do? Where should I go? We could really be having those conversations from now, so that we're ready to go in 2024. 2026. So yeah, this is a kind of watch and see, unfortunately, but I think there's still room for us to do things on the ground level, even as these major things are happening in our media landscape. But our reliance on media for just being the only source of information, I think that has to shift. I think there's many sources of information that we need to tap into, and we need to diversify what that is. And when I say sources of information, it's not just social media and mainline media. It's your church, it's your community group, it's your sorority, fraternity, it's your companies, it's your, PTA meetings. I mean, so many things are happening on that ground level that you have access to and that you have influence in. And so I think, play to your strengths and play to the communities that are right in front of you. Start there so that we can really build something powerful.
Well, Nassenia, I thank you. I appreciate what you're sharing, but I just want to raise the issue as far as the faith-based community is concerned. This election exposed to me the wide chasm between the white Christian community and the communities of color. Vastly different.
Yes.
So if the church is giving different messages, then where's the unification coming? I'm just saying. That's how
I completely agree with you. We saw that there's documented proof that shows that white Christians voted a different way than Black Christians, and my mom was like, "We're reading out of the same Bible, right?" So so I mean that is that we need to unpack, and we know that some of that is rooted in very different things. We know that there's racism that is involved, sexism, misogyny. There's a lot of things that are involved that we really haven't spoken up about in a way that's constructive, and that needs to happen. Because if we both claim to be part of this group, then why are we so vastly different? I'm not talking about one or two issues, but vastly different
the theology
in the
is
way.
different.
So
Right.
yeah. But yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. So I agree with you.
Brother Sykes, I want to say, to add to what you're saying, I think we need to start educating our own first, because what has still got me twisted in the wind on this is the reality that our Black and brown brothers and sisters voted. You're talking about the faith-based Christianity. They voted saying this is who God wants in the office. And I'm sitting here, I'm just shell shocked. It's like, it's kind of sad. It's like I expect that from the other side, but when we start talking like that, that's when I start saying, wait a minute, now we living in an alternative world, time frame, planet, whatever. So the education starts with our own first before we can others.
I absolutely agree. It's like, and it's not, people characterize it as starting small. It's not. It's starting where you have influence. It's starting with the trusted source in your community. You are that trusted source. So even if it's just 10 people, mobilize those 10 people and see how fast that spreads. So I think that's an easy, manageable way for you to get these conversations going, because sometimes it feels very overwhelming to feel like I got to change the whole nation. That's a lot. What about the people in your community? What about the people in your ward? What about the people that live right next door to your block? Start there and start having those conversations, and definitely incorporate a way that we can have this conversation intergenerationally. And so, young people, our seniors, I mean, there's so much richness when we get all of us in the same room talking about issues that affect our communities. And so I would love to see more of that as well, more of that kind of coalition building as well, because we've been separated long enough.
And Sister Collins, you had a question?
Yes, I do. I'm very concerned about this. I was in a meeting earlier today concerning something related to this, but is this information dispersed to boards of education or to our institutions of higher learning? Do you know?
The presentation today?
Yes.
It should be. I know in my media and politics class, it's one of the classes that I have, because I think it's so important as I'm trying to, train future journalists. They need to know what this looks like so that they're not, doing that kind of work. But I did mention that I do think there needs to be a curriculum, geared towards young people at every stage of education, because their consumption of news and information is different than when I was a child, different when I was in school. I had one or two sources, they have many. Many of my students don't even watch local news or cable news. They are on social media. And I've seen how social media can be powerful in getting information quickly. But my concern is that if that's the only option you have, if that's the only place you're getting your information, and it's not being fact checked or monitored by any, with any kind of responsibility. So just trying to help them to see how they can be an informed citizen first, and then helping them to be a responsible journalist is kind of my focus. It's like, start with the individual and what you see and what you believe and what you do before you get into the career where you're setting the agenda and creating stories around these narratives. You have to kind of understand it for yourself. But media literacy is something that, again, I think needs to be incorporated as well. It needs to be age appropriate. But because media now, when I was in school, media is the platform that disseminates information. That is what media is. Media is not just cable news. It's not just, Fox or CNN. It's whatever platform is created to disseminate information to a large amount of people. So that is radio, that is newspaper, that is social media, that is a blog, Huffington Post, that was a blog. And now it's considered, a reputable news source. So I think we need to be having those conversations. And I don't know if we can go back to a generation where we're all reading the newspaper again, because so much is happening with newspapers. But that was something I did with my father. I read the newspaper with him, and we talked about what I read. And I practiced reading the newspaper so that I could understand the issues better. And so that was the childhood that I came from, but that was so powerful, and it helped me decide to be a journalist. So I think more of those things need to be happening. Our reading levels, our writing levels, all those different things need to be strengthened a little bit. And I think these kind of courses can help. So yes. Teachers on the call, this is where we need to go. This is what we need to do. I'm not a teacher by trade, so I don't know if how this would work, but I think starting at your every level, at every school, and asking yourself, is there civics education in your schools currently? Is your daughter or son taking civics? When I'm originally from Jamaica, so I had to become a citizen and do the whole citizenship test and everything when I came over here. And I use that test in my class just for kicks, just to see how much my students know about civics, about not even American politics, but American, it's policy, it's everything. How many stars are on the flag? What's the national anthem? I kid you not, without a doubt, there's one or two answers that everyone gets correctly. Everything else is incorrect. And this was a test, and I always tell them this was a test I had to take to become a citizen. I had to get this right. I had to know, who was the first president, and how many stars were on the flag, and what was the name of the national anthem. And I was shocked many years ago when I started doing this, how many people didn't know, and they're just like, Professor Henry, I didn't learn that. And I was like, okay, so that's where we have to start, so that you know how your system works, how your government works, and then this debate that you want me to get into with you actually makes sense because you understand how the system works. You understand how the institution works. We can't talk about the Supreme Court if you think there are 15 members on it. We can't do that. We got to stop right there. I got to correct you and tell you it's 9, and then we can pick up the conversation. And so, just kind of reiterating how important that is, and trying to understand why it was taken out of the curriculum. I don't understand it, especially during these times. So, yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Thank you, Soror Janelle. That's a wonderful presentation. This is Cecilia Melvin Scott. And my question to you is, what do you think about the status of the Black media availability, let's say availability, especially coming through this election period? Black Star Network, of course, was pretty prominent at all of the events that they had, and being someone who wants to make sure that we're getting all the information correctly. What do you feel about that? What are your experiences with that?
Well, they're necessary to this conversation. Absolutely, they're necessary. There are media institutions that won't even cover the thoughts and hearts and desires of Black people. They just don't see it as a priority. So they're absolutely needed. It's not a luxury item, it's a necessity in order to make sure that our stories get amplified and that our stories are told. And they do have an uphill battle because they're up against major media companies in trying to get the same story, the same information. But I definitely think they serve a purpose. They're needed. We need to support them more. We need to make sure that, just like with my financial friends that are talking about supporting Black-owned banks, we need to be able to do that. And I don't think that we're there yet, where we're in complete consumption of Black-owned media companies. To be honest, I think we need to know who they are. I'm not confident that everyone even knows what options they have. And that's unfortunate. And I think what I'm always humbled by is the fact that I live in Washington, D.C. Everybody knows everything. Everyone's engaged. Everyone's out here like making up their own marches. It's like everyone's like super engaged, and you kind of think that's the way it is for the rest of the nation. And then you travel or you go back home, where home for me is Florida, and you realize they're like, no, here's another option. We should look at this. We should look at that. So I think it's going to start with us like figuring out a way where we can know who those media sources are, disseminating that information the way that everything else I talked about today gets disseminated. Disseminate that information to all the platforms, social media, all the things that we do so well as Black people, that we just use so well. We use those platforms so well to give information, figuring out a way to do that. I also think Black-owned media are in a conversation right now where they're trying to develop their own platforms, because we don't know the future of Facebook, the future of X. We don't know where we're going to fit into that future. And so creating platforms that are not associated with any of these other platforms, creating your own standalone platform that we can tap into, I think it's going to be critical for any kind of Black-owned media space. Having your own printer, having your own entity, your own, connections, bringing it back to what we know from the civil rights movement, where you got to kind of do your own to get your own, to talk to your own, because that, I think we're going to see a kind of disabling. We're going to see some kind of something happen with all of these entities, all of these social media companies. We don't know what the future holds for them, and we don't want to get caught up in that. And so I think that is a conversation that's happening now with Black media. Is like, how do we create our own for real? And that includes even our own platform. Like, is this pen I'm using, does this belong to us? Can I say that I own this? Is it mine? So that no one can come for me and say that, oh, you have to exit this building. Oh, you can't use this printer. Oh, you can't tell this story. No one has any right to do that. So I think there's a big conversation that's happening right now about ownership, what that really looks like for us. And I think you're going to hear a lot more about that as this new administration takes shape. So there's going to be a lot more stories to say, and we're going to need the space to be able to do it freely without any intervention.
The AME Church's Christian Recorder did a very good job with informing at least the AME Church. Hopefully it was expanded to, other entities, but did a very good job, and always does a very good job in informing us on, social issues, and definitely on the election this time. And of course,
oh,
they're
that's
going to
excellent.
continue to do.
I love that. And I love the spirit of that as well, too. I think that we have put all faith and hope and trust into larger media companies, and we have seen where that's gotten us. And so I think, reinvesting in our community in these ways, bringing back the newsletter, bringing back like hard copies of things, getting us off the digital space and into something that we can touch and feel and really talk about. For me, I think that's powerful, and that's something that we need to reintroduce to our community, even as we're keeping with the times. But I love that, because I love any space that is educating and supporting our community on a large or small scale. And I think if it has impact and reach, and if it's working, then this is a success. This is a victory, and that's what we're trying to do. So I would say continue doing that. And I'd actually love to get a copy of that or link to that, because I would love to see the work that you're doing. But I think that is exactly the track that we need to be on, and the kind of support we need to throw our dollars behind personally. So
yes,
sure
and also
thank you so much.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
I do have to run. I have other plans tonight, but it's been wonderful talking to you all. Thank you for those thoughtful questions. And I would again love to do this again with you some other time on some other issue that we're gonna have to unpack. But it's been a lovely evening. Thank you so much.
All right. Ms. Henry, on behalf of the McLeod Powell Lay Organization, I want to thank you for your enlightening presentation. And we also want to thank all of you who have joined us from across the Second Episcopal District, because we're just not our local lay organization, but we had members from here from all over the Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, who are on this presentation. And your participation and your engagement made this session invaluable. We hope that you gain today, the knowledge you gain will empower you to better navigate the complexities of the information landscape, discern from truth from falsehood, and contribute to a more informed society. So again, thank all of you for being with us, and our deepest gratitude to you, Ms. Henry, for this excellent presentation. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Be blessed. Have a good evening, everyone.
Everyone, thank you for joining us, and enjoy your evening.